It is my absolute honor to welcome all of you. This is really truly a last but not the least moment, as we are about to discuss one of the most pressing topics that's in our time. How do we ensure just transition and the race to net zero and decarbonization, particularly in the context of Asia Pacific? So my name is Jung-hoon. I am a consultant at LRQA. LRQA is a global assurance partner as well as a supply chain sustainability solutions provider. In my role, I work with various corporations across the globe on human rights due diligence, supplier engagement, sustainability strategies. And, I would also like to introduce today's three outstanding panelists. Robbie, she is a dedicated advocate for the Indigenous Peoples' rights. She is a member of the Kalanguya and Kakane Indigenous Peoples from the Cordillera region of the Philippines. And as an executive director of the Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous Peoples, she is a champion of indigenous-led solutions, and she always reminds us of that the climate and human rights must go hand in hand. I'm also joined by Rati. Rati is a program coordinator at the Foundation for International Human Rights, International Human Rights Reporting Standards. She has strong expertise in business and human rights, energy transition, and she has ample of experience working with UN agencies, governments, and major corporations, particularly in the space of human rights due diligence, especially in the extractive sector. And we also have, we're also joined by Poom. He is a sustainability consultant with the Environmental Resources Management, ERM, based here in Bangkok. He brings in nearly 20 years of experience in climate change, energy, and corporate sustainability. And he also brings in this valuable business and consulting perspectives on today's discussion. Now, lastly, I would also like to produce something who will be our opening speaker for our session to introduce the story of Kachin State in Myanmar and how the impact of rare earth minerals extraction, the impact of those in the indigenous peoples. Something himself is an indigenous ethnic Kachin. And he brings decades of grassroots community work, including his current role as the technical advisor at the Toy Gender Development Foundation. And his expertise spans community development, environmental justice, gender equity, and especially in addressing the impacts of these heavy rare earth elements mining in Kachin State. This session we'll begin with a case study presented by Something, who will share some perspectives of the impact of these critical minerals on the indigenous people's lives. And after the presentation, we will move on to a panel discussion with our three speakers. And finally, at the very end of the discussion, we'll open the floor for any questions and answers. All right. So without further ado, Something, please.
Okay, thank you so much. This is just very at the last minute. I have assigned to present our Kachin experience, which is really we Myanmar group are here. They are also really happy to share our experience to all of you. So. Those who didn't know about what is Kachin, where is the Kachin State? Kachin State is the most northern part of Myanmar with the green color here. And Kachin peoples are this, I'm Lechik we have 6 ethnic minority group. I'm the Lechik out of these 6 group. So we have a long border with China, which is the most rapid economic growth and the hunger on rare earth mining and other mineral, and this we are in the between of these huge country. That's why. On the other hand, unfortunately, we have a lot of natural resources. So, and then, additionally, we have armed conflict, decade-long armed conflict. So we have a lot of the exploitation from the Chinese company. So not only the rare earth mining, but also many others mineral extraction in our region. So as we know, our green energy transition is structurally demand on the rare earth mining, as we all know. In addition, recent military and also the trade war and geopolitical events, all these are particularly driving the rare earth as a crucial and to the national defense capability. So, in terms of the worldwide, also the U.S., EU, and the Japan, they recognize rare earth as a critical national security resources, since they have a lot of crisis, a lot of geopolitical military events occur. So they all try to stockpile for the rare earth resources. As we all know, China have control 80% of the rare earth production and processing. These strategic advantage that raise significant concern on this rare earth mineral. U.S., EU, and Japan, and also other big power country, all they have been developed their strategy, diversify rare earth supply chain for their own, and to reduce the relying on Chinese rare earth resources. So China and the global supply is really rely on the Kachin State rare earth, especially heavy rare earth. We have heavy rare earth and light rare earth, but in Kachin State is heavy rare earth, which is the most valuable and the most difficult to have it's really limited across the world. So, which we have this heavy rare earth. At the same time, some of you might know, the U.S. also try to explore the option to access the heavy rare earth from Kachin State, because to reduce, as I mentioned, to reduce the relying on Chinese heavy rare earth. So accordingly, in 2024 October, KIA, Kachin Independent Army, seized the whole region of the rare earth mining NDAK region. KIA, Kachin Independent Army, they control all this rare earth mining region. And since then, Chinese intervention significantly into our Myanmar armed conflict issue. So, and then also, KIA, after they seize all this rare earth mining region, KIA control the whole region, and they stop every mining, new mining. They didn't allow new rare earth mining, but they allow the old existing mining. They allow, but they also prepare. They are preparing for the new to allow new rare earth mining. So that is big challenges. That's why we heard that there are many rare earth mining in Shan State, which is the United War State Army. They ship because of Kachin is not really, the KIA is not really, not really obey of Chinese dominant. That's why they focus, they extend, the rare earth minings are extend in the Wat region, which is the Shan State. That's why there are many transboundary issue in Thailand, Kok River. So all this, that's why this become a kind of regional issue, not only Kachin, not only Myanmar, but it driving as a regional issue. Actually, it's not only regional, it's global issue. As I mentioned, according to the global rare earth market, according to the geopolitics of all these, the great power country have a lot of problem. So it become also even the global issue. So as we, as we see here, there are many impact on because of this rare earth mining. As we all know, this process, all this rare earth mining process use a lot of chemical acid, So these are not only the infrastructure, not only the environmentally affect destruction, degradation, but also the chemically is toxic, all these are pollutant on the whole, the whole river, the whole stream. Because Kachin State, as I show in the map, is the most northern part of the Myanmar, and which is totally watershed area of the Irrawaddy River, which is the largest and the most finest water resources of the Myanmar people, the most northern part to the south. So this is the really big negative impact. Sorry. Yeah, actually this is the landslide, the mountain erosion just last year occurred in the mining, near the mining region. And consequently, all our 70% of the local peoples are living in the, so we have a lot of consequences, the impact. We have many impact with the local people, local indigenous people, and many of them are arrested by the armed groups. And then we also have drug issue, also very big issue, but we have not many time to. And of course, there are the resource war. There are still continuously these resource war are continually happen in the region. So thank you very much for this attention, kind attention. And if you have discussion, please, we will discuss in later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sumping. Yeah, thank you very much for highlighting this this issue that happens at the very bottom of the supply chains of these energy transition industries, and it's something that it gets often overlooked when we talk about climate change and renewable energy transition. And I would like to now transition into a discussion with our panelists today. I have a series of questions that I have prepared for these panelists, and after our stage discussion, we would like to open up the floor for any questions and comments. So I would like to open this discussion with a question for you, Poom. Based on your 20 years of experience in this sector and in this region, what do you see is the overall status of consideration for just transition within this business sector for APAC region.
Thank you very much. Thank you much, Jun, and thank you, Kun Sung Ting, for the powerful presentation of the challenge in, as you mentioned, the first stage of the value chain of the critical raw materials that would drive this energy transition. So we know that Asia, we're at the forefront of the global energy transition. I think that is one example is what Kun Sung Ting just presented. Of course, the pace, the scale, the intensity of that transition is different across multiple countries. We have technical, regulatory, policy challenges that slow down or impede or present obstacle to those energy transitions. Things like limited grid capacity, energy regulations that are too rigid to drive decarbonization, but also the social and human impacts that we now call just transition aspect that add yet another level of complexity to the global energy transition. Now, recently, worked with the WBCSD, the World Business Council on Sustainable Development, to survey the landscape of the status of energy, the just energy transition in APAC region, Asia Pacific. The survey looked at typically, power company, energy company, companies that deal with fossil fuel, but also companies that rely on energy and resource. So the survey, we asked 32 questions on the theme of energy transition journey. So things like what are their commitments, their process in stakeholder engagement, social dialogue, how they are upskilling or reskilling their workforce, etc. So these companies from various sectors were sent these surveys, they respond, we follow up with interview, etc. And what we've learned is that the building blocks of the just transition are there already, but they can't just be building blocks, they have to be put together, and that's where the challenge comes. Now the tools for businesses to understand, to assess the social and human impacts of their actions, and the actions within their value chain along the energy transition path are there, right? They are a little bit familiar with it already. Just transition is not a new topic to them, even when sometimes they use other terms to refer to this process of just transition. Sometimes they don't package all these issues under one umbrella of just transition. So about 3/4, 75% of the companies we surveyed, they have clear commitments. They describe what are committed to doing in their transition, in energy transition. A lot of them have broad corporate sustainability goals, so they incorporate just transition as part of their social and human rights commitment. And some have concrete actions initiative already. But as I mentioned, putting these blocks together remain a bit of a challenge. So responses on stakeholder engagement and tracking performances shows that many companies are still a long way off from embedding just transition in a holistic way, in a consolidated and structured way. Responses included things like fragmented efforts, so actions or initiative here and there, but lacking a focus on consolidating and measuring the outcomes for workers and communities. As we say, right, what you can't manage, what you don't measure. So a lot of these things are, just to have some activity, some initiative out there, but following up with clear monitoring, resource, and reporting and disclosure still lacking behind. And now these gaps aren't particularly surprising because similar surveys during the past 1 to 2 years show similar results. There is a 2024 Climate Action 100+ Net Zero Company Benchmark shows similar gaps with about 88% of companies surveyed not having developed a just transition plan. Some other studies also show similar lack of regular, structured, meaningful stakeholder engagement on energy transition, which also is reflected in our survey. So most companies knows, at least have some idea of who are the stakeholders that their actions along the energy transition path will be affecting. But taking the action to engage with them in a structured way, regular monitoring, meaningful engagement way, that is still not being followed up to the same extent that they have made those commitments. So more than 80% of the companies, again, already know have some sort of engagement mechanism or activity, but only a few companies reporting having real engagement with vulnerable groups with concrete measurable impacts, etc. So other challenges in this front that is not driving just transition at the pace that they should be, including lack of financial resources, lack of clear guidances, inadequate policy support from the government or in the industry, trade organization, etc. But there are also some positive developments. So for example, June of this year, I think Indonesia reaffirmed its commitment to building inclusive workforce through expanded partnership with ILO to support the implementation of the Indonesia roadmap for the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions. So there are some national level, international level collaboration, the Just Energy Transition Partnership that are providing financial or technical guidance to support big corporations in the value chain of resource intensive segment to implement just transition in a more concrete manner. So I think that's pause there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Poom. And my next question is relating to what are the actual implication of those gaps that these companies are having in terms of engaging with the stakeholders, engaging with the communities when implementing these energy transition projects. So my next question is for Rati. So based on your experience, what are some of the key human rights risks that these businesses often overlook when delivering these kind of climate goals or especially in energy transition projects?
Thank you for the question, Poom. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that sometimes we have is that climate change automatically give positive impact for people. But if we don't embed a human rights perspective on it, climate action can actually exacerbate inequalities and harms. Let me give you 3 categories of risks that I see often overlooked from first experience. First, it's about community health and safety. Even renewable projects, which is usually we celebrate, right? It could also bring risks. For example, in Indonesia, there was a geothermal project. However, it can cause toxic gas leaks that not only created immediate health risks or threats, but it also destroyed plantations, contaminated water, and disrupted food security for the community. Another example is the biomass. Biomass is often promoted as renewable energy, right? Energy produced from organic materials like wood, crops, and waste, and others. However, large scale of projects could pose a risk clearing like intact forests for indigenous people that have relied on food, medicine, and others. The second one is the environmental impact. Take the example of the mining industry. As we know, like rare earth, that the presentation before, the case study, the EV production has grown tremendously, right, in Indonesia, even over to have 17 million units produced last year, and Indonesia is now one of the world's largest, world's top nickel suppliers. Not only nickel, but also like the rare earth, for example, this comes with consequences. The mining operations have caused like resettlement and displacement, environmental impact and deforestation, and local communities, including indigenous people, have lost their livelihoods. Third, lack of the FPIC or free prior informed consent. The resettlement issue is quite overlooked in regard to the remediation because a lot of dissatisfaction from the resettled local residents have arisen due to the lack of meaningful consultation before. And fourth is the supply chain accountability. Renewable energy is often promoted for the climate purposes, right? A climate solution. However, when we look deeper to the supply chains, it could associated with unsafe labor conditions, environmental degradation, and community impact. So if we only look at the carbon footprint and ignore the human costs, we are not solving the problems, but actually we are just shifting it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And Robbie, I would also like to pose you the same question about, what are some of the human rights risks that you are seeing, especially from the indigenous people's perspectives, and also, in this kinds of like just transition, like energy transition, clean energy projects, like what are the elements that you think are the decisive elements that determines the success or failure of protecting the indigenous community rights?
Thank you. First off, I'd like to thank the organizers of this session for giving the space for speakers from presenting lived realities on the ground, our brother here from the Kachin region, and for us indigenous peoples to also share our perspective in this session. And this is what the RBHR should be for, to bridge that communication gap between consultancy firms, businesses, human rights defenders, indigenous peoples, governments, and businesses. Now that said, for indigenous peoples, we've always been excluded, in decision-making processes, in defining priorities, in defining solutions. And most often, these solutions, these projects are imposed in our territories. I come from a region where mining and dam has caused not only grave environmental harms to our community and our people, but also it has caused irreparable damage to the cohesion of indigenous people's collective way of life. The manipulation of free, prior, and informed consent, or the non-conduct of it, or the co-optation of our leaders to give consent, divided many indigenous communities when even if the project did not continue, the community is still divided until now. And that's something that cannot be repaired in just a short time, because it also destroys the collective way of living of indigenous peoples, and it has implications to our continuity as peoples. But going to the solutions, talking about this just transition, setting priorities, defining what is critical is of a concern for us, because defining mining for minerals as saying critical to be able to achieve the climate goals is an excuse. We see it as an excuse for further greenwashing and green colonialism, because who defines what is critical? And from these critical minerals that are being mined, how much of it really is going to the energy transition and how much of it is going to other processes, and we're quite concerned that a number of these minerals actually are being used for ammunitions for war. So I think it's important that we also look at this, that in just saying that just transition, mining of critical minerals, because these are needed for clean energy technologies, we need to be more introspective. We need to be more critical of this one. And most often, human rights due diligence is an afterthought. When things are already happening on the ground, when communities are already protesting, when violations are already happening, that's when the thought of conducting due diligence is being done, and which should not be, because it should be at the onset of the project. Human rights due diligence should be conducted to reduce the risks, not only for communities, but also for businesses, because we've seen in the presentation, non-respect, non-recognition of human rights results to conflict, results to disruption of projects. It results to further environmental degradation. And what's also being missed out in the discussions is also the longer-term effect of these projects, of these solutions that are being implemented, the legacy impacts of mining, the transboundary impacts also of dams. I mean, we cannot just talk about clean technology. We cannot just talk about energy transition without really looking at the whole chain and the whole chain of impacts that this would bring. Already we see in the Pacific the pollution, the waste that's coming out from all these solar panels. How will it be managed in small island communities where transportation is quite difficult? This has to really, the circular economy also has to be looked at. Now, for indigenous peoples, for the just transition, I would focus on the positive side of how it can succeed. it's important that at the government's level, mandatory human rights due diligence is there, and an enabling legal framework is put in place, but not only that, putting in place also an accessible and effective grievance mechanism for affected communities and indigenous peoples. The second one is the conduct of free, prior, and informed consent, not as a procedural process, but a trust-building process with communities from the start of the project, even before you design, because that's where problems come out when designs, when the project is already approved and the design is set. But then afterwards, you would see that the design would cut across sacred areas, burial grounds, which are definitely a no-go zone for indigenous people. So it's important that really at the very onset, engagement with indigenous peoples as rights holders is conducted, not as stakeholders. For us, engagement should be as indigenous peoples with rights holders. So much is at stake for us in these projects. We lose our land, we lose our livelihood, we also lose the continuity of our people, because most often there's no responsible exit for all these projects. The other point that I'd like to put out is also direct partnership with indigenous peoples and direct financing for indigenous-led initiatives that's anchored to the respect of our rights and equitable benefit sharing. And again, for businesses and companies, it's really, really important to have an accessible and effective grievance mechanism that's also gender responsive. We have to make sure that it's not a one-off grievance mechanism that responds to all intersectional concerns. No? You have to have grievance mechanisms should be gender responsive, but also should have reasonable accommodation for concerns of specific sectors such as persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we for this, like the whole RBHR session this year, we have repeatedly talked about human rights due diligence from the perspectives of manufacturing industries, construction industries that are relevant to these clean energy, just energy transitions. And I would like to, continue on this thread of thought and ask questions for, both Rati and Poom, based on your experience, communicating, working with these companies to implement human rights due diligence. How do you see that? How do you see these human rights due diligence supporting a just transition to clean energy? And I think we can start with Rati. Yeah.
Okay. As what FIRST has experienced, HRDD, especially when we have focused on the E1, is really the backbone of ensuring that climate action can also be a just transition, right? If we take a look at the definition of just transition itself, so just transition is not actually for the environment. It's not only about ensuring the climate action or the zero waste and other, but actually just transition also means that we want to create a greener economy that is fair and inclusive also for the decent work and considering that no one left behind, right? So by conducting HRDD, especially if company commit by adopting the human rights policies that explicitly apply to climate and energy transition projects, preventing by embedding the risk early. So by conducting identification of the risk early, the companies can know that if there will be any risk of human rights violations that will happen in the future. If already, like Robbie said, sometimes the HRD already conduct when the risk already happened, right? The companies can integrate and they can embed human rights safeguards directly into the climate strategies. For example, by ensuring the workers, the indigenous people, and vulnerable groups are included in consultations and planning. Also, by conducting HRD, companies also can do the meaningful stakeholder engagement, right? That is not just ticking a box, but really, if they are doing it, they listen to the affected communities directly, and that are included to address their concerns. And lastly, if they conduct the HRD the right way, they can provide the remediation if in accordance with the United Nations Guiding Principle standards, right? For example, in practice, like the companies can help by assessing the fair and inclusiveness, right? By conducting HRD, the companies can see like whether there is any discrimination to the workers, whether they already provide the disability-friendly facility, for example, or other things that could eliminate the male domination field, for example. So all in all, from a social justice perspective, the HRDD could help companies to identify and to prevent if there is any risk, if they are really doing it with consultation with the stakeholders and right holders. Yeah.
Thank you, Rati. And so just follow on that. I think HRD can really help in one part of that just transition equation, because it's as just transition, right? It's not is the key part. The very important part, of course, is to minimize or eliminate any negative adverse impact on human rights, on the social impacts of any activities along that just energy transition path. But the other side of that coin is to make sure that the positive impacts are fairly distributed. So let us focus on the negative part, because that's where HRDD mainly focuses on, right? To identify opportunities, potential for actions by the corporate. In this case, we're talking on the corporate-centric side, actions on the corporate side that may impart adverse impacts on communities, on rights holders. So HRD really have the tools to help on that side of the equation, as you know, the process to identify risk, to assess the severity, the likelihood, etc. So the corporates that are, as Rati mentioned, doing HRD the right way, not just as a rubber stamp or after the fact exercise. Companies that are doing the right way are already experienced in using those tools to plan ahead, to see that if they undertake these new activities, go into new sector, there's some idea at least what are the potential negative impacts those actions may occur. Another concern is that HRD, as we discussed a little bit on focusing on what's already passed. In the past, I think a lot of HRD exercise focusing on what already happened, and just transition, energy transition, again, is not a new thing, right? We've been transitioning from one technology to other for millennia, but the scale and the pace of the current energy transition this time is really complex, right? Really widespread. So I think it's a balance between recognizing some of the patterns of impacts that can impact on current dependent users of fossil fuels and other current technologies that might be phased out one day, phased down. And also being open, being quite creative to identifying what are the other kind of impacts that we have never seen before. I don't have an easy answer for this, but I think when we talk about just transition with the more advanced company, I think there are a lot of the executives, again, they may not use the term just transition, but a lot of them understand that the actions that they're undertaking, whether going to new segment of mining, they could be traditional coal miners, moving on to the so-called new energy mining, with all the challenges, the human environmental aspect of the challenges of going to new business could potentially be quite destructive. They're quite aware and aware of the need to manage this and being open to considering all these new threats and new risks. So I think the balance between using the tool that they already know and being open to new risks and opportunities that they might face in this new, potentially unseen business activities. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you both, Rati and Poom. So in the last couple few minutes, we have talked about what are the issues and what are the potential solutions that companies can take to conduct this human rights due diligence in the right way. And for the remaining time that we have, I would like to talk a little bit about what are the looking ahead to the future and what are the next steps. And I would like to turn it to Robbie to talk a little bit about what are the things that you would like to see going forward from the activities of these companies?
I think first for us indigenous peoples is really the faithful and sincere conduct of the free prior implementation of our right to free prior and informed consent. And again, this is not a procedural process. This right is anchored to our right to self-determination, determining the development that they want, but also our collective right to our land, territories, and resources. So this process that we undertake in free, prior, and informed consent is a decision-making process for us on the development that we want within our territories. Is it aligned to our development aspirations? If not, then what should we do? No? And again, for the free, prior, and informed consent process to not just be a matter of compliance for businesses, because this is most often the case in many countries and in many projects where it's just one of the many documents that you have to comply with. No? Again, we've seen how non-conduct of free, prior, and informed consent has disrupted, has stopped a lot of projects on the ground. And as we talk now, there's a dam project in Kalinga, in my province, in the Cordillera, because of the manipulation and the not proper conduct of free, prior, and informed consent, the project cannot continue because the FPIC has been withdrawn. So it's important, it's really important that at the onset, when human rights due diligence is conducted and it's identified that indigenous peoples are affected, that the engagement starts at that process, no, not when violations are already happening. The other one is on the reform of business practices. I think it's already very common to many businesses. There were and there are a lot of violations happening in many of their operations. They should learn from that, no? And reform the system from within. Not just putting in place voluntary measures, recognizing respect for human rights and indigenous peoples' rights, but also putting this into practice. Because we also see a number of businesses adopting performance standards on human rights, on indigenous peoples' rights, but most of them are just in paper. On the ground, we still see continuing violations. So we need more, how do you call that? We need more examples of how these papers, these documents from within businesses also translate down to their operations on the ground. And also, I think it's important for the businesses to really, I'm not quite familiar with business terms, but the whole supply chain. Now, you cannot just operate on your own. For producers to, for brands to really look at from up to down, how are the products coming out from these brands being produced? What are the impacts that it has on the people and the environment? Because in this crisis that we are in now, we cannot work in isolation. Businesses cannot just look at their brands and not look at the impacts that it has when these raw materials are being produced for their brands. No, the whole supply chain has to be looked at, and the voluntary measures that's coming out from businesses can either help strengthen or weaken respect for indigenous people's rights. We've been not collaborating, but we've been helping some multi-stakeholder processes of businesses in developing performance standards, in also defining what would be an accessible and effective grievance mechanism for indigenous peoples, and we're still committed to that, no? But again, we need to see those from paper to practice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And my last question for today is for Poom. And it's about, for the businesses who are here and for the businesses who are engaged in decarbonization or energy transitions and looking into, implementing their net zero commitments. What are some of the key takeaways that, Poom, you would like to give to these businesses on how you should be doing this in the right way?
Thank you. So my very brief takeaway message, let me go back to that report, the survey that we did again with the WBCSD. And again, just transition is not a foreign or a new concept being just put in here by the global climate change agenda, but it's something that most companies that are thinking about reducing their dependence or reducing their carbon emissions, decarbonizing their own operations in the value chain should think about is first to understand what are the impacts. I think a lot of companies are already aware of this, where the actions might create those potentially adverse impacts on the rights holder along the value chain, not just within their own boundary. The second one actually just echoes to Roby as well in bringing the vulnerable groups lens perspective to understand that not all the rights holder would be affected in the same degree. So bringing that special sensitivity to that might help prevent really bad adverse impacts. And the third one, also common findings from the report, was meaningful engagement with the real stakeholders, not just coming up with typically I would say the old school way of doing HRDD or human rights or impact exercise, which could be a first step. Is getting your own people in the room to identify where the impacts are, but the next step is to go out there and really engage with the true rights holder in the field and have a meaningful conversation with them. And the last one goes back to the point about lack of clear guidance, but not to let that lack of guidance or policy or regulation impede actions. There are things that, step 1, 2, 3 that are quite clearly necessary and can be done. Don't have to be, full scale, but at least get a start on something. That, step 1, impact assessment, having sustainability with the vulnerable groups lens perspective, and also meaningful engagement with the real rights holder, real stakeholders. Those are the 3 main points. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for all of our 3 panelists, as well as something for the presentation earlier. And with that, I would like to open up the floor for any questions from the audience. Over there in the first row.
Thank you very much to all the panelists and the moderator. A really interesting session. Dane from Myanmar, and so my question would go to Sia Zongling from the Kachin State. In the current situation in Kachin State in Myanmar, due to conflicts, it should be a heightened human rights due diligence that should be conducted. And that being said, as a local expert, first of all, do you think a meaningful stakeholder engagement can actually be conducted in Kachin State, in the area? And also, if it can be conducted, as a local expert, what would be your advice to those who are conducting stakeholder engagement in the Kachin context? And the second is more of a yes or no question. Have you ever come across businesses conducting heightened human rights due diligence there? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. Since we all know we have really serious armed conflict, continuous armed conflict, so that is the reason they are the key stakeholder, I mean the KIO, KIA, and also other armed groups, they really give the reason that this is the revolutionary time. They have no way to follow this. They have actually in the previous civilian government time, we developed very good, very comprehensive policy guideline for the mining, but because of this spring revolution, is the whole country, not just central government and Kachin KIA armed group is fighting. It's the whole country. So that's why they could not, or whatever the guideline, they could not follow, they don't care, I would say. They just don't care because they are really need revenue for this conflict. They need to support their people, their soldiers. So we as a environmental activists, CSO. We have been trying a lot since long ago. We have been trying advocating to the armed group, but it's not progressing. But because of now is after the KIA control in this region is anyhow they are now started thinking, because not only the region, but also even, as I mentioned in my presentation, even the Western country, they are also approaching, India also approaching to this critical mineral. So they are now started thinking to be a little bit better. That is hopefully, I'm not sure. Thank you, Siama.
I think just quickly, our general recommendation, engaging with businesses and financial institutions in relation to indigenous peoples in conflict areas, our recommendation is actually these are no-go zones for projects, because implementing any activities, any projects in those areas worsens the safety and security of the affected communities and of indigenous peoples. Even if you how they call it, do a more in-depth mandatory human rights due diligence in the area, you will never get a very good response. You will never get a safe space for the people to really be able to talk about their concerns and their recommendations. So for us, it's really a no-go zone. If it's identified as a conflict area, it should be avoided.
Yes, second row in the middle.
Hi, good afternoon. So I don't have a question per se, I have a suggestion. Now, I think this is pertaining to the UN Global Compact. I think I'm not wrong in saying that the UN Global Compact is, if not the largest corporate citizenship initiative, is one of the largest and has access to a very large network of private sector organizations. And in the UN Global Compact, there are accelerator programs that fast-track action towards climate ambitions, so on and so forth. There are also separate programs that encourage companies to engage in just transition. Now, I've followed the Climate Ambitions Accelerator program, which encourages companies to take action for the green transition and encourages companies to commit to the Science-Based Targets Initiative. But as far as I know, just transition is not included in the Climate Ambitions Accelerator. I feel like it needs to be combined, and there needs to be components of just transition in the accelerator program, especially the case studies that you have shared. I think in the morning also there was a session. If you can share and bring those case studies into that Climate Ambitions Accelerator program, that inclusive knowledge, I think can really make a difference in kind of galvanizing action in the private sector to make, I don't know to what extent the difference can be, but I think at least to make that commitment to support those causes. So that's just a suggestion I would like to present.
Thank you very much for the comment and the suggestion. Would anyone of the panelists would like to react to the comments? Yeah. Boom.
Okay. Thank you for the comment about the UN Global Compact. Actually, in my previous life, I worked with a company which was a major supporter of the UNGC, and I'll try to bring that conversation to the group. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, a lot of initiative already going on, right? The UN Global Compact have that, and then UNDP also have the BHR, which also includes the just transition, and ILO also have similar kind of thing. Yeah, maybe, yeah, it's also a good opportunity for the companies to learn better, because actually the situation is what makes HRDD is less accountable is because there is not yet high knowledge from the company on this matter. So it's good that a lot of initiative now is going on. Yeah.
All right. I think I saw a hand over there. Yes.
My name is Panupan from WFD. I would like to share my observation and would like to ask for the panelists or for your thought on this. From my observation, is like safeguarding human rights is effective as long as everything is fine. But when when it has to compare between the safeguarding and the revenue or capital gain, it seems like safeguarding could be degraded. For example, an energy company had invested in particular country by partnering with the state-owned enterprise, but when conflict happened, and the revenue of this enterprise could be used in the finance, military operation and abuses, so there's nothing happened. Even though that company is explained that they committed to the human rights and safeguarding. And I think this is ubiquitous practice, let alone the FPIC, because in order to comply with FPIC, you have to invest a lot of resources, including the money, people, and knowledge. And also the remediation as well, I think is quite left for the private sector to provide the remediation to the stakeholders and the affected stakeholders. So my question is, how could we have the true safeguarding human rights, especially in the just transition, and how could we balance between the safeguarding human rights and the capital gain and the revenue? That is my question from this kind of phenomenon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think this is also relating to, what is the actual business case for the companies to conduct these human rights due diligence when they are, implementing these just transition, clean energy transition projects. So I would also, again, direct this question to Ratipum, you guys to comment.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's, as Kun Panupan mentioned, it's balancing business reality with safeguarding human rights, not always a straightforward answer. Of course, I think as Roby mentioned, in some cases where there are very clear no-go decision that can be made, that one such instance was, but that you raised an example. For this one as well, if the financial contribution for this energy company might be channeled into the military or human rights violation activity by governments or armed groups, again, the best practice or the safest practice in terms of human rights, of course, would be no-go or suspend that kind of operations. But also, these are often balanced by other considerations like, is it easy enough for that operations to cease immediately, or is there a way to step back or a way to work with the relevant stakeholders to ensure or at least minimize the chance that that funding, that activity would go towards supporting human rights violation. So they are not, I wish the world could be like black and white, right? And we know where the lines are. But when we operate in gray areas, that is where it's difficult to navigate. That's not a clear answer, but that is the reality that we face when working with clients. Some clients that we advise clearly the no-go or you cannot take this action. But there are other instances where you raise an example that could be quite complex as this.
Yeah. Similar with what Pum already explained, when we have the client that asks whether it's a go or no go, it's actually similar when there is a legal due diligence, when the business conducting a legal before investment, right? The companies usually ask for legal due diligence, right? When conducting human rights due diligence, it's also better if the result is really in a conflict situation, which it could cause a very bad human rights impact. There is no prioritization, right? Whether one human rights is better or should be prioritized than other human rights. But clearly, if it's about the conflict situation, it is really relates to the jus cogens, right? It really relates to the gross violation of human rights. So we should clearly state it's a no-go if it relates to the conflict situation. But in terms of how to balance it, maybe if there is still option of not in a conflict situation, for example, in usual business as usual in the extractive industry, there's still option for before we suspend the vendors, we can provide an awareness to the suppliers or vendors before suspending it. If they still don't want to comply or obey the human rights regulations, that's no go. But if they still want to do better, I think we can still do another change before we suspend them.
What's in it for businesses, no? The cost is higher for businesses if free, prior, and informed consent is not conducted, and if the people are not included in consultation and decision-making. And I think there's a study that was produced by, if I'm not mistaken, Oxfam, that showed the cost that it entails businesses if human rights is not respected in their business operations. And it would really have an impact to your capital and also to the reputation of the business. So it's not just about doing human rights due diligence as a process, but it's really not just bringing a good name to the business, but really doing what should be good, responsible business conduct. But the other one, I've also shared this to the Japanese companies that I talked to in the Embassy of Japan. We're at a tipping point, no? We cannot dilly-dally in terms of protecting what's left of what we have now. And we have a shared responsibility. And businesses and governments have greater accountability to really make sure that we reach that target. Otherwise, we see left and right flooding all over. If business conduct is not transformed immediately, I mean, who would be your consumers? People are drowning, people are dying, there's so many landslides. Who are you serving for? Thank you.
Can I talk? Yeah, regarding to the no-go, I think in our situation in Kachin State, it's not, I mean, they are taking opportunity when we have armed conflict, they have no rule at all. So that they are very easy to get the permission. And then also, they don't need to follow all this proper process. They have to do all this wastewater treatment, and then they have proper process as a, but they don't do all this process. They don't need to follow because these are not the regular situation. It's armed conflict. So they're taking opportunity for this kind of situation. That's why it's continuously happened, and now even increase in the Shan State in the war region. So that is my understanding.
All right, thank you for the powerful responses from all of our 4 panelists. I see another hand over there.
Is there any possibility that community become a partner of that renewable energy in just transition phases? Is there any possibility?
That's actually the core of the work of the Right Energy Partnership with Indigenous Peoples, establishing direct partnership between states, also between businesses, the private sector in supporting Indigenous-led renewable energy initiatives. That's anchored to the leadership of communities of Indigenous peoples, to the respect for human rights and equitable benefit sharing. And we have examples from our partners who are implementing Indigenous-led renewable energy initiatives where they partnered with companies based on rights-based principles to implement meaningful projects on the ground.
All right, do you have any other questions from the audience? If not, I think to close this session in a full circle, there was a video that something wanted to show earlier in the session that we didn't get the time to do so. So if you are able to turn it on as a closing remarks for this session, I think it would be great.
This is the whole process, every single process of the rare earth mining walking. Yeah, please have a look. So thank you very much. As you see on the video, that they are using the toxic, the acid, the hole you see is they put at the whole mountain. That's why when I make a presentation, there are landslide every year. There, when the rain comes, we have flooded, great flooded. Even before the flooded is only, let's say, more than 10 years. 8 years, the flooded once the flooded come, but now it's every year. Just last year, this year also coming. The whole mountains are collapsed because they have, as you see in the video, they have the hole, and they put the acid there, and they collect the rare earth from the whole mountain, and they collect in the ground, in the tank, a very big tank, and they just leave it. It's already toxic already, and all these toxics are flowing along the river from the north to the south. So it's really all these, how to say, the ecosystem of the food chain of the stream, rivers are polluted, and all these local people, local indigenous people livelihood are really, because Chinese, they learn from their experience, so they didn't buy our fruit, many fruit in the mountain region. We sell to the China, but now they don't buy anymore because they know that is already toxic. So, yeah, that is what really happened in my region. That is my region. The river, the stream, even the color is changed because they use a lot of chemical, the acid, I would say. So all this polluted already. So all these beautiful stream, rivers are destroyed by this mineral rare earth mining. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Something, and thank you all for our panelists and our audience. So I think this is the end of our session. I understand that the closing plenary in the other conference room, so that means that we don't need to evacuate this room for another 15 minutes. So if you have any lingering questions, or if you'd like to say hi to our panelists, please do come, and I think we should have time to do so. Thank you very much.